Welcome to your favorite program, Books and Nooks of Hope. My name is Philip Guy and I am your host for this show. Today we are dealing with a book entitled Bondage. The Bondage is written by Dr. Robert Willand, and our guest on studio today is none other than Pastor Stephen Sisei. Pastor Stephen Sisei is an editor at Africa Herald Publishing House with many years of experience dealing with books and books and books. And today, Pastor Sisei is here to guide us on the book, The Bondage. Welcome to the studio, Pastor Sisei.
Thank you for hosting me today.
And thank you so much, our viewer, for watching this program. As you all know, this book is always about books. And today, as we explore this book about bondage, tell us, what is this book all about, Pastor Sisei?
The Bondage, as you've rightly said, was written by Willand, who happened to have been a missionary in Africa.
For many years.
For many years. This book is trying to explain what has captivated many of our generation today. And so the fact that it is titled The Bondage is that there are certain things which we are going to discuss shortly that have enslaved the populace or the society in which we live in today. So many people are being bound by things that they are not supposed to involve in their life.
So what are these things, Pastor, that have bound and enslaved our people that are really not supposed to enslave them?
Many people have been enslaved by alcohol, and many have become addicts, and to the point where they are unable to live or lead a normal life without alcohol. So they're actually in jail, so to speak. They're being held captive by alcohol. And later we will see another thing that is binding many people to the social ills that exist in the society today.
What is this other thing that also binds people in these ills?
This book addresses alcohol and cigarettes, which have become very, very problematic to many people, such that it has distorted their life.
And I realize that even young people, even those who are going through school, are also caught up in this snare.
Unfortunately, those are some of the social ills that we are dealing with in the society today. Many people make money out of suffering through other people. And even young children are not left out of the picture. They have found a way of channeling these bad things to even the young people.
Now let's go back to alcohol, and I'm looking at page 10 of this book. I think that should be the second chapter.
Yes.
You know, many people have been talking about, you know, Noah was able to drink alcohol, and that's how his generation was able to continue when, you know, people were swept out of the by the floods. And there are many things. Did God really create alcohol for people to drink?
That is not the case. The Bible actually says in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 29 that God had made man upright.
God made man upright.
But he has sought out many inventions. So one of the inventions that man has come out with is fermentation. Because for you to have alcohol, you have to ferment what God had originally intended for good use as food to replenish our bodies. So man has begun inventing ways in which they ferment the fruits or the cereals, and so they end up having alcohol. But it is not God's intention that we use these fruits or these cereals in fermentation, that we end up having getting intoxicated by the same. Because we are breaking down some of these elements. So let's say through the process of fermentation.
But what about the case of Noah that I just mentioned? Remember, after the floods, it was only Noah and his daughters who were left on the surface of the earth? And they actually had to give their father fermented drink so that he could lie with them and they would be able to produce children. Otherwise, they would have died without leaving anybody else on the surface of the earth.
Yes, that actually goes to support that it was not God's intention for there to be alcohol. That is one of the reasons. Because you see, they end up stupefying their parents and end up sleeping with them to sire the next generation.
Which is actually a shameful act.
It is a very shameful act. So it is through that process of fermenting, actually it is the process in which Lot ended up having to sleep with his.
It was actually Lot.
It is Lot, not Noah.
Yes.
So it is Lot who ends up drinking and is unaware of what has happened the night, and then the other daughter comes. And so that tells you that we have moved away. We have sought our own inventions that actually contravenes God's intention for us. So the Bible actually is very emphatic, or makes it very clear that alcoholic drinks are not God's intention. It is not the intention of God for someone to drink. So all these processes that people have managed to ferment the cereals or the fruits that God had made for our replenishment when we eat them, for us to grow healthy every day, somehow through the inventions of man, actually because of sin. We have managed to have these fermentations and what we call alcohol.
But it was not God's plan at all.
It was never God's intention.
Now, I've met young people who say that there's cases in the Bible where wine is actually advocated for. You know, some people say Paul advised Timothy that a little wine is good for your stomach. What is this issue about wine in the Bible?
Yeah, it is necessary to quote the Bible within its context. If we misquote the Bible, we will want to justify why we want to use wine or alcohol. Because the definitions of the words, actually in its original language, suggest that it was not the fermented one that people are referring to or wanting to use. Otherwise, it will be like saying God is contradicting himself. God would not say don't drink, then on another part he will advise you or suggest for you to drink. So because if you read, for example, in page 17, where he quotes the Bible in Proverbs chapter 23, he says that we have war, sorrow, and contentions, and babblings, and wounds without cause. Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarried long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth its color in the cup, when it moves itself aright. So that goes to emphasize the part that it is not the fermented one, because people will also say that Christ made wine somewhere in a wedding in Cana.
Yeah, in a wedding in Cana of Galilee. He turned water into wine.
Which is actually the first miracle that Jesus performed. And you'll find that in John chapter 2, verse 1 to 11. So that in itself, like I've said, will suggest that God is contradicting himself.
So, Pastor, you're actually saying the word oinos, which is translated into wine, can actually refer to both fermented and unfermented wine.
Yes, and that is why I was emphasizing the part of reading that within the context in which it has been used. Because the Greek word that was used to refer to wine is oinos, which can be used for both.
So when I read through my Bible, how do I know this time it is used to refer to fermented and this time it is used to refer to unfermented wine?
The main emphasis that we need to find here is because the context, like I said, is what will give the distinction in which the
word is used.
The word is used.
Okay.
Many times, even if you read in later translations of the Bible, like when they use the translation in Latin, the word that is used also will suggest it is fermented or unfermented. But the context is what determines what is being said. For example, when Jesus gave the wine during the Last Supper, so that is the context, or even the one that he made.
So that is actually the wine that is taken during the Lord's Supper.
The Lord's Supper. So it is necessary for us to read within the context.
So Jesus could not have served people alcohol during the Lord's Supper?
No way. Like I said, that would be contradicting himself.
He
would not tell you in another part alcohol is bad, then in another part is the one making for people to consume.
Now, Pastor, there are some people who say that if you take just a little bit of alcohol, it is not all that bad. I don't know what does Willand have to say about this. In fact, there are many people who say for proper digestion, you know, when you go for dinner, you can take a glass of red wine or maybe a glass of white wine. What did you say about moderate drinking?
That is actually what is addressing in chapter 4 of this book. Is moderate drinking safe? I read somewhere that one wrong step makes the next one easier. So it is a process you don't want to begin by trying to imagine that you'll always be safe and you'll always come out of it. It will be a build-up and eventually you'll be in the...
It will be difficult. You'll be caught up.
You'll be in the jail of this of the alcohol.
You'll actually be in bondage.
You will be in bondage. This one now will end up binding you. And he actually narrates a story of somebody who went, she's called Elizabeth, who went to see a psychologist.
Yes.
And because of the challenges she had in her life, he was told, just drink a little. Eventually, she ended up being an alcoholic. She was dependent.
So the psychologist actually messed her up instead of helping her out. Entirely
messed up her life. Actually, Willand enumerates many processes in which people go through and end up being in the bondage of alcohol. And there are people, like you had suggested, there are people who use, they want to give biological reasons, there are some want to give psychological reasons, there are some want to give socio-cultural reasons for drinking. So that unfortunately in some contexts or even in some homes, it is part of what is being served.
Yeah, I remember in many cultural families, sometimes when people would go to pay for dowry in some African context, you know, beer was a part of the process in paying dowry and people were to freely consume of this.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that is what people will give as excuses for wanting to drink, because socio-economic processes in which they are used to every day of cultural settings, and they will want to use that to justify. But moderate alcohol is never safe for anyone.
So you'd advocate that someone does not even try to start drinking at all?
At all. The safest cause is not to even touch it.
And I see that Willand is talking about that in chapter 5. So what is his greatest reason for not touching it at all?
So, like he's enumerating in that chapter of this book, The Bondage, for example, in page 28, is one, of course, the emphasis is biblical.
Yes, yes.
Like if you read in the Bible, that a true sense of self-worth means we are all kings. Remember, the Bible says in 1 Timothy that we are a chosen
generation,
a royal
priesthood. Oh, yes.
So it is important for us to understand that our calling excludes what will make us impure as kings. So it is necessary for us to understand is who we are as Christians, for that matter.
Oh, that reminds me of what it says also on page 31. I think this is Proverbs, where it tells Lemuel that kings should not drink wine or have craving for alcohol.
Yes.
So it means all of us being a part of the royal priesthood must not touch anything to do with wine or alcohol.
At all. At all.
And what would be the advantage of that, not touching it at all?
Of course, again, we will not have had an opportunity to begin interacting with alcohol, because the previous chapter is discussing safety. There's no safety in moderate. But the intention is for us to maintain our purity in our calling as Christians. So avoiding anything that would make us impure as the royal priesthood, as it were.
I hope a young man is watching and listening out there, because many people start drinking alcohol at a very young age, and before they know it, they are caught up in the snare and they're not able to come out of it. And as Pastor Sisei, you're telling us, walking us through this book, The Bondage, the safest path is not to touch at all, isn't it?
Yes, actually in page 31, the same page you quoted, he cites James chapter 4, verse 7, which says, resist the devil.
Resist the devil.
Yes, because all these things are inventions that courtesy of the devil. wanting us to derail us
and drift us from God.
From where God wants us to
Okay.
the path that God intends for us.
Okay, now, Pastor, if someone has already been caught up and is already drinking, is there a way to stop? Does Willand offer us a path out of this?
There's a path in which we can have help if we have unfortunately fallen into the trap of drinking. So there are many ways in which intervention can be sought. One is maybe, for example, seeking help from there's an organization called Alcoholic Anonymous.
Yes.
Where you can go there and you'll be guided on how to come out of the problem in which you have been entangled in that problem of drinking by sharing the experiences with other people. Let us remember also that being a slave to alcohol, there is a spiritual aspect in it, there is a mental aspect in it, and equally there is a physical aspect in it, and that you can read in page 45.
Page 45.
And onwards, and it can help you understand that first of all, since we are a chosen generation, a chosen generation. So it is important for us to understand who we are, so that we don't compromise what God wants for us as his as co-heirs with Christ. You see, now that is a spiritual problem. Because the longer you drink, you are drifting
away
from
God,
from where God wants you to be. Two, for you to be able to come out of drinking, obviously it is slavery actually is in the mind.
In the mind.
Yes, because once the mind is polluted, it will be a problem for you to control the rest of the body.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the only way. So when someone gets this and is able to read through that page, they're actually able to get themselves out of the problem of alcohol.
Yes, Willand explained the steps that one can take so that you are able to come out of the problem that you are having with alcohol.
Oh, thank you so much. You're watching the program Books and Nooks of Hope, and in this program we talk about nothing but books. And today we are talking about a book entitled The Bondage by Robert Willand. And our guest on studio is none other than Pastor Stephen Sisei, the editor at Africa Herald Publishing House. I am your host, Philip Guy, and please stay tuned. Don't go away, because we'll be right back after the break with nothing else but books and books alone. Welcome back to your favorite program, Books and Nooks of Hope. I am Philip Guy, your host as always, and our guest on studio is none other than Pastor Stephen Sisei, who is an editor at Africa Herald Publishing House, and is here to guide us as we devour this book, The Bondage, by Dr. Robert Willand. And in the first part of this program, we have talked about addiction, specifically of alcohol, and in the next part, we talk about the other thing that enslaves us, especially here in Africa. And tell us about this new enslavement of Africa, Pastor Sisei.
Yes, thank you. The second aspect of bondage, there is another very, very captivating that is becoming a problem in the society today in Africa.
Yes.
And he has used an analogy of the slavery when Africa was colonized and slaves were being sold.
Yes.
So, and the fact that you are a slave, you don't have
rights, you don't have freedom.
Yes, there is nothing you can do for yourself. Somebody else has taken charge
of your life. Yeah.
So that analogy is using it to describe how much you will be a slave to smoking or cigarettes. So this part of people being enslaved by smoking.
So in other words, when you get hooked to smoking cigarettes, you're actually compared to someone who is a slave.
Yes.
And you cannot be able to extricate yourself out of this. You're just caught up in the web, and you have to, abide by the whims of your master.
Yes. Yes. And in this case, the master has become a cigarette.
A cigarette.
Where you are dependent on it. and there is really nothing you can do without.
Now, how dangerous is this enslavement, Pastor Sisei?
It is very unfortunate that people have ended up living a life that has consumed much of their life to the point where they're either suffering from diseases that are occasioned by the many times or the cigarettes that they are smoking or inhaling the smoke that they have found it part of their lives.
Yes.
So there are millions of people today in Africa.
And you're talking about millions.
Millions of people who are struggling in that problem. Maybe anyway, there may be people who have not understood it, and that is why there is intervention for those who have that challenge of cigarette smoking. And it is unfortunate that even young people are being lured into cigarette smoking.
And some in their very tender ages, even primary school kids are already caught up in this.
Yes, and unfortunately also even the unborn children may suffer the effects of alcohol based on the mother when she is expectant and begin or is continually using
smoking or drinking.
It also affects
the unborn child.
The unborn child.
Now, so you mentioned about the diseases that come with smoking cigarettes. What are some of these diseases that are so common that affect us in as relates to smoking cigarettes?
The most common problem that has been found has to do with lung cancer. There are people who have ended up having lung cancer. Unfortunately, anyway, being also in the presence of somebody who smokes, they call it side seam smoke.
Okay.
You can be able to be inhaling. In fact, you are inhaling more. More nicotine or more of that smoke.
When you sit next to someone who smokes. In fact, yours has not even gone through the filter. You probably get it direct.
Directly.
And it can even be more dangerous.
It is actually more dangerous.
Does Willan talk about that?
He talks about it. If you read from page 66 onwards, you will find he has even given us an illustration. I don't know if it will be very clear in the camera, of a lung of someone who has been using smoke. And over
for a long time, or
for a long
period
time,
of time.
and compared to the lung of somebody who has not been smoking. So smoking is a real, okay, it enslaves. It enslaves because you will be dependent on the nicotine that is there.
And every little money you get, you just think about buying your next puff, and you just want to keep smoking one after another.
Yeah, unfortunately, some people have become chain smokers. They use the butt of the other cigarette to light another one. And that tells you how much he or she is enslaved.
I guess they don't even know how much money they're losing in their pocket, because when they buy that puff, it's only a little coins. But if you could save it for a whole year, maybe.
Actually, that is the most unfortunate part, because billions are being spent on this buying or acquiring cigarettes, sticks, and then to smoke. So the more packets you will be smoking per day is the more
money you're losing.
And unfortunately, anyway, that is because one of the reasons why other people, not all, but one of the reasons why other people who are addicted end up stealing. Because they need to fund, the continual urge
to smoke
on and on. All the time.
Now, Pastor, I met someone who's told me this, that my grandfather smoked and he has not had cancer. My father smoked and he has not had cancer. And I have smoked for so many years and I have not even had that cancer. So is there poison in cigarette that actually kills? That's what I want you to help us. Does Willan talk about that?
Yes, chapter 11 of this book, The Bondage, he outlines actually some of the chemicals that exist
in cigarettes.
out of tobacco, because
Yes.
cigarettes are made from tobacco. Of course, the other people who have made it from other things.
Yeah.
And the first one, at least he says here, in page 79, he says nicotine is one of the principal poisons in cigarettes.
Nicotine.
Nicotine. That is one of the main chemical component of that is found in cigarettes. So the second point he addresses here is scientific research proves that 1 out of 3 smokers will kill themselves through this habit.
So it actually kills.
It kills. So statistically, there are people who have died because of problems that arise because of one being able to smoke. So the most active ingredient that will either make you enslaved and eventually make you sick is nicotine, according to what he is explaining here. And I also remember the process in which you are smoking. It goes through the trachea, it goes into the lungs. So eventually it will be injurious to all the nasal canal, and you will end up having problems. Actually, he enumerates other diseases that people have ended up suffering in page 81. Because of this problem of smoking.
I see so many
people
of these
suffer
diseases
heart
here.
attacks, people suffer stroke, people suffer kidney cancer, people suffer from stomach, ulcer of the stomach or esophagus, cancer of the esophagus, cancer of the bladder, cancer of the pancreas, cancer of the larynx, cancer of the lip and the mouth, cancer of the lung, emphysema, cancer that or if you smoke, you will end up getting any of these or even complications that arise because of smoking.
How comes my friend was telling me that his grandfather smoked, his father smoked, and even he smokes, but has never gotten any of these cancers?
I think the cancer or the processes in which people end up with their lifestyle, Of course, the statistics that he has given here, he says at least 1 in 3.
So it's like not everybody.
Obviously, it is not a must that you will be in that statistic of 1 out of 3. But obviously, the main emphasis that we are trying to, Willand is trying to help us understand, is that it leads to disease and it leads to death once we begin consuming cancer every day of our life.
Now, when you talked about, the dangers in this the diseases that come with smoking cigarettes, I think about all these cigarettes that are being manufactured all over. There are big companies that are employing so many people and are bringing an income to families. What do we do about these people if we stop, let's say, manufacturing cigarettes? Where will these people find their sources of income?
Actually, there is nothing that we can equate to our health. We should not compromise our health at the expense of an entrepreneur who is seeking to make money. It should be intentional on our part that we live healthful lives outside someone who is an entrepreneur and seeking to generate income for themselves. So because there are many people, and unfortunately, again, that is why he's saying it is enslavement of Africa, because many of these companies have
They are foreign companies, but they've moved to Africa.
Moved their businesses to Africa. So the best advice that we are given is avoiding some of these things, because there is nothing that you can use as a substitute for your health at the expense of an entrepreneur who is seeking to make money.
Okay.
You can't compromise your health because you want to make somebody rich.
But now, pastors, you say, when I look at page 86, Willand is actually talking about arguments in favor of smoking. Could there be any argument in favor of smoking, and what could this be?
Unfortunately, in chapter 12, he outlines some excuses people want to give to justify their reason for wanting to
So
smoke.
they're really not arguments, but excuses.
Somebody just wants to find a way of justifying why they have ended up smoking. The first one is saying that the most prevalent argument in favor of smoking has always been that it is pleasant.
I remember some of those ads that were talking about smooth all the way. So it appears to be pleasant if someone smokes, and it's advertised as smooth all the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is one of the way that these advertisements are tailored to lure people into making smoking, because anyway, being human, sometimes we crave some form of pleasure. So if you find that as a means of satisfying the urge that you have, you will fall into that trap.
Yeah.
And that will be a very bad excuse for ruining your health. The other one, he says that there are people who say smoking is a habit and they can't do without it. Actually, the problem is they have been enslaved already.
Okay,
and
so it's become part of their habit.
It has become part of their way of living. The third reason is, I would prefer not to smoke, but my friends, even my boss, encourage me to smoke and
So
offer. This is more or less like peer pressure. Peer pressure.
Yes,
there are people who will want to find to fit in
a society,
some given cycle.
circle.
Yes, and that to be part of it, you will want to do what they are doing, and in some cases, people end up smoking. Some people even make it look at the fourth reason argument people give here is it is patriotic and noble to smoke because your cigarette taxes go to your government. That is what I was saying.
That is the argument, that it generates income for the government.
Yeah, and that is what I was saying. You cannot ruin your health at the expense of somebody who is making money.
I even imagine if the government is making a lot of money from these cigarettes, they'll end up spending more money treating their citizens. So it's a zero-sum game, or even it's a waste at the end of the day.
Yes, it is a total waste, because there are more complications that arise out of that small business entity that has given or generated income for the government in form of tax, which more tax will be needed to mitigate the problems that will have arisen because of smoke.
Now let me ask you, if I am already caught up in smoking cigarettes and I would want to quit, is it hard to quit, or I can easily walk out of it anytime I want?
Yes, Whelan has addressed that in chapter 13, where he enumerates steps that we can take to come out of the problem of smoking. And it is not actually hard to quit smoking, because if we walk around the excuses that people were giving to begin smoking, obviously this should not be hard.
So it's really an excuse that people are saying it's hard.
No.
But if you really want to get out of it, you can actually walk through the steps and get out of it.
Yes,
Okay.
you can get.
Now, Pastor, as we wrap it up, as we go to the last chapter, can you help us to go through the steps of how to stop smoking? I believe there's so many of our viewers out there who are struggling with how to stop smoking. What do we do to stop smoking?
Yeah, that is chapter 14 of this book. Actually, it is a process that has been given by a medical doctor, or guidelines that have been given by a medical doctor. One, of course, in 1 and 2 here emphasizes the importance of water and how we use water. If we use water in the process to either detoxify, if we drink water, we need to use water also by bathing and doing things that will help us detoxify the system. Then the other part that he mentions is consistency. Important in terms of regularity. That is page 101, I suppose. 101. So that if we go through life in a rhythm that our body understands, okay, or our body moves in a given process or in a rhythm, so that we are able to get sufficient rest.
Yes.
The other step that we need to take also is how to what the intake, what we eat and what we drink, also goes a long way together with the food that we eat. In the 6th step, he gives us a list of what not to eat.
Okay.
Because there are things also that eventually will contain nicotine and may trigger the urge to smoke again.
I believe we can all get that from this book, isn't it?
And the most important thing is acquisition of this book will help us go through all the steps that will help us get out of the problem.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. You're watching Books and Nooks of Hope, and this program we talk about books and nothing else. And today we've been talking about the bondage as guided by our guest, Pastor Stephen Sisei, an editor at Africa Herald Publishing House. I am your host, Philip Guy, and we are glad you're watching this program. So please don't forget to join us next time as we get into another episode of Books and Nooks of Hope. Thank you and be blessed.